Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart down the long hall of the Harmony Music Academy. Her old sneakers made squeaky sounds on the shiny marble floor. The wheels of her cart rolled slowly as she moved from room to room. It was 9 p.m. and the building was quiet. Most people had gone home hours ago. Maria was 42 years old and had been working as a night janitor at this music school for 3 years. She cleaned the floors, emptied the trash, and wiped down the desks and chairs. Every night was the same routine. She started in the classrooms, then moved to the practice rooms and finished in the main concert hall. The Harmony Music Academy was not like other schools. This was a place where rich kids came to learn music. The walls were covered with photos of famous musicians from long ago. There were expensive instruments everywhere. Some of the violins cost more money than Maria made in a whole year. Maria walked past a display case filled with shiny gold and silver awards. The school had won many competitions. Their students went on to play in big orchestras around the world. Some became famous and had their pictures on the walls too. She stopped her cart outside one of the practice rooms. Through the small window in the door, she could see a beautiful grand piano. It was black and so shiny that she could see her reflection in it. The piano bench was made of soft leather. Sheet music was spread across the music stand. Maria had cleaned this room many times before. She knew that this piano cost more than most people's cars. The nameplate on the front said Steinway & Sons. She had heard the teachers talk about how special these pianos were. Only the best music schools had them. She opened the door and went inside. The room smelled like wood polish and old paper. She started by emptying the small trash can near the piano. There were crumpled pieces of sheet music inside. Some student had been practicing and made mistakes. As she cleaned, Maria thought about her 2 daughters at home. Emma and Sophia were both 16 years old. They were twins but looked very different. Emma had dark hair like Maria, while Sophia had lighter brown hair. Both girls were good students and worked hard in school. Maria worked 2 jobs to pay for their needs. During the day, she cleaned offices in downtown buildings. At night, she came here to the music academy. She rarely got more than 5 hours of sleep, but she did not complain. Her daughters needed good clothes for school and money for college later. The girls did not know how hard their mother worked. Maria never told them about her tired feet or her sore back. She always smiled when she came home in the morning. She would make them breakfast before they went to school. Then she would sleep for a few hours before going to her day job. Maria finished cleaning the practice room and moved her cart to the next one. This room had a violin and a cello. The instruments sat on special stands that kept them safe. She was always very careful around the instruments. She knew they were worth thousands of dollars. She dusted the stands and wiped down the chairs. Through the walls, she could sometimes hear students practicing during the day. The sounds were beautiful. Some students played perfectly, while others were still learning. But all of them had something Maria's daughters did not have: the chance to learn music from the best teachers. Maria had always loved music. When she was young, her mother would play the radio while they cooked dinner together. Maria would dance around the kitchen and sing along, but her family never had money for music lessons. They could barely pay for food and rent. Now, as an adult, Maria sometimes listened to classical music on her phone while she worked. She used earbuds so no one would hear. The music made the long nights go by faster. It made her feel less alone in the big empty building. She moved to the main concert hall. This was the biggest room in the academy. It had rows of red velvet seats that faced a large stage. On the stage sat the most beautiful piano Maria had ever seen. It was bigger than the ones in the practice rooms. The wood was so dark it looked almost black. The keys were perfect white and black rectangles. Maria had been told that this piano cost over $200,000. She could not even imagine having that much money. It was more than she would make in 10 years of working both her jobs. She started cleaning the seats one by one. Each seat had to be wiped down and checked for any damage. The academy was very strict about keeping everything perfect. Rich parents paid a lot of money to send their kids here. They expected everything to be clean and nice. As she worked, Maria thought about her daughter's future. Emma wanted to be a doctor. Sophia wanted to be a teacher. Both dreams required college, and college cost a lot of money. Maria had been saving every extra dollar for 3 years. But it was still not enough. Sometimes she felt sad that she could not give her daughters more. Other kids at their school had new clothes and cars. They went on vacations and had the latest phones. Emma and Sophia never complained, but Maria knew they noticed the differences. The girls were good kids. They helped with cooking and cleaning at home. They studied hard and got good grades. They both had part-time jobs at a local grocery store. They gave most of their money to Maria to help with bills. Maria finished cleaning the concert hall seats and moved toward the stage. She always saved the piano for last. It was her favorite part of the job. Not because it was easy to clean, but because it was so beautiful. She took out her special cloth that was made for cleaning pianos. The academy had given her specific instructions about how to care for this instrument. She had to use a certain cleaner and wipe in a certain direction. She could never press too hard on the keys. As she gently cleaned each key, Maria wondered what it would feel like to actually play this piano. She had never touched the keys except to clean them. She knew that only students and teachers were allowed to play the instruments. But sometimes, late at night when the building was completely empty, Maria would imagine sitting on the bench and playing a beautiful song. She would picture her daughters sitting in the red velvet seats, listening to their mother make music. It was just a dream, of course. Maria did not know how to play piano. She had never had a music lesson in her life. But dreams were free, and they helped her get through the long, quiet nights at the academy. Tonight was different from other nights. Maria could hear voices and music coming from the main concert hall. She had forgotten that the academy was having a special party tonight. Rich people who gave money to the school were invited to eat fancy food and listen to student performances. Maria tried to stay out of the way. She cleaned the classrooms first, hoping the party would be over by the time she needed to clean the main hall. But the party was still going strong at 10 p.m. She could hear people laughing and talking loudly. She decided to clean the practice rooms instead and wait for the party to end. But then she remembered that her supervisor had told her to clean the hallway outside the concert hall tonight. There had been a small water leak earlier and the floor needed special attention. Maria took her mop and bucket and walked toward the main hall. She could see people through the open doors. The women wore beautiful long dresses that sparkled under the lights. The men had on expensive suits and shiny shoes. Everyone was holding glasses of champagne and small plates of food. She started mopping the marble floor outside the hall. She worked quietly, trying not to disturb anyone. The people inside were too busy talking and eating to notice her. Students from the academy were playing music on the stage. The sound of violins and piano filled the air. Maria tried to focus on her work, but the music was so beautiful that she stopped to listen for a moment. A young girl was playing a piano piece that made Maria's heart feel warm. The girl's fingers moved so fast across the keys that they looked like birds flying. While Maria was listening, she accidentally backed into a small table that had been set up in the hallway. The table was covered with glasses of champagne for the guests. When Maria bumped into it, several glasses fell over and broke on the floor. The sound of breaking glass was loud. People in the hall turned to look. Maria's face turned red with embarrassment. She quickly bent down to pick up the broken pieces. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly. "I will clean this up right away." A security guard came over to help her. "Don't worry about it," he said kindly. "Accidents happen." But then a loud voice spoke from behind Maria. Well, look what we have here." Maria turned around and saw a tall man in an expensive suit. He had gray hair and cold blue eyes. She could tell from his clothes and the gold watch on his wrist that he was very rich. Several other people had gathered around to see what happened. "Careful there, the man said in a mean voice. "Wouldn't want you breaking anything valuable." The people around him laughed. Maria felt her face get even redder. She continued picking up the glass pieces, trying not to look at the man. "I'm very sorry, sir," she said. "It was an accident." "I will pay for the glasses." The man laughed louder. "Pay for them? Do you have any idea how much those glasses cost? They're crystal from Europe. Each one costs more than you probably make in a week." More people had stopped their conversations to watch. Maria felt like everyone was staring at her. She wanted to disappear into the floor. "Richard, please," said a woman next to him. "There's no need to be so harsh." But Richard was enjoying himself. No, this is important. People need to understand their place in the world." Maria stood up slowly, still holding pieces of broken glass. "I understand, sir. I will be more careful." "I'm sure you will," Richard said. He looked at her cleaning uniform and her worn shoes. "Tell me, what's your name?" "Maria Santos, sir." "Well, Maria Santos, I suppose you've been working here for a while?" "Yes, sir." 3 years? 3 years of cleaning up after your betters, Richard said with a smirk. And I suppose you think you know something about this place? About music? Maria was confused by the question. I like music, sir. I think it's beautiful. Richard's eyebrows went up in surprise. Then he started laughing again. You like music? How wonderful. I suppose you think you understand what these students are doing up there on stage? I think they play very well, Maria said quietly. Oh, you think they play very well? Richard repeated her words in a mocking voice. Did you hear that, everyone? Our janitor here is a music critic. The people around him laughed again. Maria could feel tears starting to form in her eyes, but she tried to hold them back. Tell me, Maria, Richard continued, do you play any instruments yourself? Piano, perhaps? Maria shook her head. No, sir. I never learned. Of course you didn't, Richard said. But I bet you think you could if you tried, right? I bet you look at that beautiful piano in there and imagine yourself playing it. Maria did not answer. She just wanted this conversation to end so she could go back to work. I thought so, Richard said. You see, that's the problem with people like you. You think that just because you can appreciate something beautiful, you can actually do it yourself. But there's a big difference between looking at art and creating it. Dr. Elizabeth Crawford, the director of the academy, had heard the commotion and came over. Is everything all right here? She asked. Oh, everything is fine, Richard said. I was just having an interesting conversation with your cleaning lady about music appreciation. Dr. Crawford looked at Maria with kind eyes. Maria is one of our best employees, she said. She takes excellent care of our facility. I'm sure she does, Richard said. But we were discussing whether she thinks she could play our instruments. Isn't that right, Maria? Maria looked down at the floor. I never said that, sir. But you were thinking it, Richard said. I can see it in your eyes. You look at that $200,000 Steinway piano and you think, maybe I could play that. Am I wrong? The crowd was getting bigger as more people came to see what was happening. Maria felt trapped. She wished she could just disappear. There's nothing wrong with appreciating music, Dr. Crawford said firmly. Of course not, Richard agreed. But there is something wrong with people not knowing their place. That piano is a work of art. It's not a toy for people to imagine playing with. Maria finally looked up at him. There was something in his voice that made her angry. She had been embarrassed and ashamed, but now she felt something else. She felt like this man was being cruel just because he could be. I know it's an expensive piano, sir, she said quietly. I clean it every night. I take very good care of it. I'm sure you do, Richard said. But cleaning something and playing it are very different things, don't you think? The way he said it made it sound like cleaning was not important, like Maria's work did not matter. She thought about how she worked 2 jobs to take care of her daughters. She thought about how tired she was every day and how she never complained. Yes, sir, she said. They are different things. But something in her voice had changed. Richard noticed it too. He smiled like a cat that had caught a mouse. Good, he said. I'm glad we understand each other. But Maria was not finished. But both things are important, she added. Richard's smile got bigger. Oh, really? And why is that? Because someone has to take care of beautiful things so other people can enjoy them. The crowd was very quiet now. Everyone was listening to every word. Richard clapped his hands slowly. How lovely. A philosopher janitor. Tell me, Maria, since you're so wise about music and pianos, what do you think about the music we heard tonight? Maria knew this was a trap, but she was tired of being talked down to. I think the students played beautifully, she said. And you can tell that how exactly? Richard asked. Because music makes you feel something, Maria said. When it's played well, it touches your heart. Richard laughed the loudest he had all night. Music makes you feel something. How precious. And I suppose if you sat down at that piano, you could make people feel something too. Maria's face was burning with embarrassment and anger. But before she could answer, Richard held up his hand. Actually, he said with a cruel smile, I have a better idea. Richard Blackstone stepped closer to Maria. His eyes had a mean look that made her feel uncomfortable. The crowd around them had grown larger. More people were coming out of the concert hall to see what was happening. I have an idea, Richard said loudly. Since our janitor friend here seems to think she understands music so well, maybe we should test her knowledge. Dr. Crawford stepped forward. Mr. Blackstone, I don't think this is necessary. Maria was just trying to clean up an accident. Oh, but it is necessary, Richard said. He was enjoying being the center of attention. You see, I believe in putting my money where my mouth is. I believe in backing up words with actions. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. The people around him gasped softly. Everyone knew that Richard Blackstone was one of the richest men in the city. He owned several technology companies and was worth millions of dollars. "Here's what I'm going to do," Richard announced. "I'm going to make a little bet with Maria here." "Sir, I don't gamble," Maria said quickly. "Oh, this isn't gambling," Richard said with a big smile. "This is education. You see, I think it's important for people to understand their limits, to know what they can and cannot do." He opened his checkbook and held his expensive pen above it. "I'm going to make this very simple for you, Maria. All you have to do is walk over to that beautiful Steinway piano and play one note." "Just one single note," the crowd murmured with surprise. Someone whispered, "Just one note? That's easy," but Richard was not finished. "If you can play just one note properly on that piano, I will write a check for $10,000 to this academy right here and now." The gasps from the crowd were louder this time. $10,000 was a lot of money. It could buy new instruments or help students who could not afford lessons. "But," Richard continued, holding up one finger, "when you fail to play even one note correctly, you have to admit something to everyone here." "What?" Maria asked. Her voice was very quiet. "You have to admit that some people should stick to what they're good at. You have to say that cleaning is your job, and music should be left to people who actually know what they're doing." The crowd was completely silent now. Everyone was looking back and forth between Richard and Maria. Some people looked uncomfortable with Richard's challenge. Others seemed excited to see what would happen. Dr. Crawford tried to interrupt again. "Mr. Blackstone, this is really not appropriate. Maria is here to work, not to be put on display." "But she's the one who claimed to understand music," Richard said. "She's the one who said she could tell when something was played well. I'm just giving her a chance to prove it." He turned back to Maria. "What do you say? One note. Just press one key on that piano and make it sound good. If you can do that, the academy gets $10,000. If you can't, then you learn a valuable lesson about knowing your place in the world." Maria looked at the piano through the open doors of the concert hall. It sat on the stage like a beautiful black mountain. The lights from above made its surface shine like a mirror. She had cleaned that piano hundreds of times, but she had never actually played it. "I don't know how to play piano," she said honestly. "I know you don't," Richard said. "That's exactly my point. You see, everyone here paid good money to come to this academy. They expect their children to learn from real musicians, not from people who just think music is beautiful." He made his voice sound silly when he said the word beautiful, mocking the way Maria had said it earlier. "But here you are," Richard continued, "working in a place full of music, listening to it every night. And I bet you've started to think you understand it. I bet you've even imagined yourself playing one of these expensive instruments." Maria felt her cheeks burning. He was right about one thing. She had imagined playing the piano. Late at night, when she was alone in the building, she had looked at the keys and wondered what it would be like to make music instead of just listening to it. "I never said I could play," Maria repeated. "But you want to, don't you?" Richard asked. "You want to sit down at that piano and pretend you're one of the musicians instead of just the help." The words stung. Maria thought about her daughters at home. She thought about how hard she worked every day to give them a better life. She thought about all the time she had listened to music while she cleaned, letting it carry her away from her troubles for a few minutes. "There's nothing wrong with wanting to make music," she said quietly. "You're absolutely right," Richard said. "There's nothing wrong with wanting. But there's a big difference between wanting and being able to do something. That's what separates people like us from people like you." Some people in the crowd looked uncomfortable now. A few were shaking their heads, but no one spoke up to defend Maria. "So what do you say?" Richard asked again. "Are you willing to try one note? If you can make that piano sound good with just one note, you win $10,000 for the academy. If you can't, then you admit that music should be left to real musicians." Maria looked around at all the faces staring at her. She saw curiosity, pity, and excitement, but she also saw something else in a few faces. She saw people who wanted her to fail, people who agreed with Richard that she should know her place. "What exactly do you mean by properly?" Maria asked. Richard's smile got wider. "Oh, I think we'll know it when we hear it. A proper note is clear, strong, and musical. not just a random bang on the keys like a child would make. Dr. Crawford stepped closer to Maria. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "This man is being cruel for no reason." But Maria was thinking about more than just this moment. She was thinking about all the times in her life when people had looked down on her because of her job, or her clothes, or her accent. She was thinking about her daughters and how she wanted them to grow up believing they could do anything. "If I try and I fail," Maria said to Richard, "you want me to say that I should stick to cleaning?" "That's right," Richard said. "I want you to admit that not everyone is meant for the finer things in life. Some people are meant to serve and some people are meant to be served." The cruelty in his words made several people in the crowd shift uncomfortably. One woman whispered to her husband, "This has gone too far." But Richard did not seem to notice or care. He was focused on Maria like a hunter focused on his prey. "And if I succeed?" Maria asked. "Then I write a check for $10,000, Richard said. "But let's be honest, Maria. What are the chances of that happening? You've never played piano in your life. That instrument costs more than you'll make in 5 years. Do you really think you can just walk up to it and make beautiful music?" Maria looked at the piano again. She thought about all the nights she had spent cleaning it, carefully wiping each key. She thought about all the times she had listened to students practice, paying attention to how they moved their hands and how the music sounded. "Just one note?" she asked. "Just one note," Richard confirmed. "But it has to be a good note. A note that shows you actually know something about music." The crowd was getting restless. Some people wanted to go back to the party. Others were excited to see what would happen. A few were clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. "Well?" Richard asked impatiently. "What's it going to be? Are you going to accept my challenge, or are you going to admit right now that you're out of your league?" Maria looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Dr. Crawford, who gave her an encouraging nod. Finally, she looked at the piano one more time. "One note," she said quietly. "And if it sounds good, the Academy gets $10,000. "That's right," Richard said. He was already starting to laugh, thinking about how embarrassing this was going to be for Maria. "Okay," Maria said. "I'll try." The crowd erupted in surprised whispers. Richard's eyes lit up with excitement. He was going to enjoy this humiliation very much. "Wonderful," he said loudly. "Everyone, please follow us into the concert hall. We're about to have a very educational demonstration about knowing one's place in the world." As the crowd moved toward the piano, Maria felt her heart beating fast. She had no idea what she was about to do. She only knew that she was tired of being treated like she was less than other people, just because she cleaned floors for a living. The walk to the piano felt like the longest walk of her life. The concert hall felt much bigger when Maria walked into it with everyone watching her. The red velvet seats that she cleaned every night now held dozens of people in expensive clothes. All their eyes were on her as she slowly walked toward the stage. Her cleaning cart was still in the hallway. Her mop and bucket were where she had left them after the accident with the champagne glasses. But now she was walking toward the most expensive piano in the building, about to attempt something she had never done before. Richard Blackstone followed close behind her, talking loudly to the crowd. "This should be very educational for everyone," he said. "It's important to understand the difference between appreciating art and actually being able to create it." Some people nodded in agreement. Others looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Dr. Crawford walked beside Maria, whispering quietly, "You really don't have to do this. This man is being a bully." But Maria kept walking. With each step, she felt something strange happening inside her chest. The fear was still there, but it was mixing with something else. Something that felt like anger, but also like determination. She reached the steps that led up to the stage. The piano looked even bigger and more beautiful from here. The lights above made the black surface glow. The white and black keys seemed to stretch on forever. "Take your time," Richard called out from behind her. "Though I suppose there's not much to prepare for when you're just hitting one key." A few people laughed. Maria could hear them, but their laughter seemed to come from very far away. She climbed the 3 steps to the stage. Her worn sneakers made soft sounds on the wooden floor. The piano bench was exactly the right height. Maria had noticed this during her cleaning, but she had never thought about why. Now, as she approached it, she realized that everything about this instrument was designed to make music as perfect as possible. She stood next to the bench for a moment, looking down at the keys. Each one was perfectly clean and perfectly placed. She had wiped these keys with a soft cloth hundreds of times. She knew exactly how they felt under her hands. "We're waiting," Richard said impatiently, "though I suppose you might need a moment to figure out which end of the piano makes the sounds." More laughter from the crowd. But Maria barely heard it. She was remembering something from long ago. A memory that she had buried deep inside her mind because it hurt too much to think about. She sat down on the bench. The leather was soft and comfortable. Her feet rested naturally on the pedals at the bottom of the piano. Without thinking about it, she adjusted the bench slightly, moving it just a little closer to the keys. "Oh, look at that," Richard said sarcastically. "She knows how to sit on a bench." Very impressive. But Dr. Crawford was watching Maria carefully. Something about the way Maria had adjusted the bench looked familiar. It looked like something a real pianist would do. Maria placed her hands in her lap and looked at the keyboard. There were 88 keys total. She had counted them many times while cleaning. The black keys were arranged in groups of 2 and 3. The white keys made a pattern that repeated over and over. "Any time now," Richard said. "We don't have all night." Maria took a deep breath. She was still wearing her cleaning gloves. They were yellow rubber gloves that protected her hands from the cleaning chemicals. She looked at them for a moment, then slowly pulled them off. Her hands were not what people expected. They were not rough and ugly from cleaning work. They were actually quite graceful, with long fingers and neat nails. There were small calluses on her fingertips, but they were old calluses that had been there for many years. She placed her gloves carefully on the edge of the piano. Then she held her hands above the keys, not touching them yet, just feeling the space between her fingers and the instrument. "What is she doing?" someone whispered. "I think she's trying to look like she knows what she's doing," another person answered. But Maria was not trying to look like anything. She was remembering. The memories were coming back like water flowing through a dam that had suddenly broken open. She remembered other piano benches, other keyboards, other concert halls that were much bigger and more famous than this one. She remembered the feeling of music flowing from her heart, through her arms, into her fingers, and out into the world through the piano keys. "Maria?" Dr. Crawford said softly. "Are you all right?" Maria looked up at her. There were tears in Maria's eyes, but she was smiling. "I'm fine," she said. "I just need a moment." Richard was getting annoyed. "This is ridiculous. You said you could play one note. Just hit a key and let's get this over with." Maria looked at him. The fear was gone from her eyes. In its place was something that made Richard feel suddenly uncomfortable, though he did not know why. "You said one note," Maria said quietly. "You said if I could play one note properly, you would give $10,000 to the academy." "That's right," Richard said. "One note. Should be easy enough, right?" Maria smiled again. It was not a nervous smile anymore. It was the smile of someone who knew something that other people did not know. She placed her fingers on the keys. Not randomly, but in a specific position that any piano teacher would recognize immediately. Her left hand rested on the lower keys, her right hand on the higher ones. Her fingers curved naturally, the way they had been trained to do many years ago. Dr. Crawford gasped softly. She had been a music teacher for 30 years. She knew what proper hand position looked like, and Maria's hands were positioned perfectly. "What's wrong?" Richard asked, noticing Dr. Crawford's expression, but Dr. Crawford did not answer. She was staring at Maria's hands in amazement. Maria closed her eyes for a moment. In her mind, she could hear her old teacher's voice from so long ago. "Music is not about the notes on the page," the voice said. "Music is about the emotions in your heart. Let your heart speak through your fingers." She opened her eyes and looked at the keys again. She had promised to play one note. Just one note. But which note should it be? She thought about her daughters at home. She thought about all the nights she had worked so hard to give them a better life. She thought about all the music she had listened to while she cleaned, all the beautiful sounds that had helped her through the difficult times. And then she knew which note to play. She placed her right index finger on middle C. It was right in the center of the keyboard. Not too high and not too low. It was the note that every piano student learned first. The note that was the foundation of all other notes. The crowd was completely silent now. Even Richard had stopped talking. Everyone was watching Maria's finger as it rested gently on the key. "Just one note," she whispered to herself. Then she pressed the key. The sound that came from the piano was not what anyone expected. It was not a simple plink or poke. It was a pure, clear, beautiful note that seemed to fill the entire concert hall. The sound was warm and rich and perfect, but Maria did not stop there. Her finger lingered on the key, controlling exactly how long the note lasted and how it faded away. Then, before anyone could react, her other fingers began to move. What happened next changed everything. The single note hung in the air like magic. It was perfect, clear, strong, and beautiful. But before anyone could speak or move, Maria's hands began to dance across the keys like they had been doing it all their lives. Music poured from the piano like water from a fountain. Not just any music, but some of the most difficult classical music ever written. Maria was playing Chopin's Fantaisie Impromptu, a piece that even advanced students struggled with. Her fingers moved so fast they seemed to blur. The melody soared and dipped, whispered and shouted. Each note was exactly where it should be, exactly when it should be there. The rhythm was perfect, the timing was flawless, and the emotion was overwhelming. Richard Blackstone's mouth fell open. He had expected Maria to poke at one key like a child. Instead, he was hearing music that was better than most professional concerts he had attended. The crowd was frozen in shock. Some people had their hands over their mouths. Others were leaning forward in their seats, unable to believe what they were hearing. A few had tears running down their faces. Dr. Crawford was staring at Maria with wide eyes. She recognized this piece immediately. It was one of the most challenging compositions in classical piano literature. Students usually needed years of training before they could even attempt it, and Maria was playing it perfectly. The music filled every corner of the concert hall. It seemed to wrap around each person like a warm blanket. The melody was so beautiful that it made people think of their happiest memories and their deepest dreams. Maria's whole body moved with the music. Her hands flew across the keys, her arms swayed gently, and her head tilted as she listened to each phrase. She looked like she was having a conversation with the piano, and the piano was answering back with the most beautiful voice in the world. The technical parts of the piece were incredibly difficult. There were sections where Maria's right hand played a fast-flowing melody, while her left hand played a completely different rhythm. Most pianists needed months just to learn how to coordinate their hands for this piece, but Maria made it look effortless. "This is impossible," Richard whispered to himself. But the music continued, proving that what seemed impossible was actually happening right in front of him. Professor James Mitchell, who taught advanced piano at the Academy, was sitting in the third row. He had heard this piece performed by some of the world's best pianists. He knew every note, every phrase, every subtle detail that made the difference between a good performance and a great one. What he was hearing from Maria was not just great. It was extraordinary. "How is she doing this?" he whispered to his wife. Other music teachers in the audience were having the same thoughts. They could hear things in Maria's playing that only came from years of serious training. The way she shaped each phrase, the way she controlled the volume and speed, the way she made the piano sing instead of just making noise, these were skills that took decades to develop. The piece moved into its most emotional section. The melody became sad and beautiful, like someone remembering a lost love. Maria's playing became softer, more gentle. Each note seemed to carry a piece of her heart. People in the audience were crying now. The music was so moving that it reached deep inside them and touched feelings they had forgotten they had. Even people who did not usually like classical music found themselves completely captivated. Richard tried to make sense of what was happening. Maria was just a janitor. She cleaned floors and emptied trash cans. She wore old clothes and worked at night. How could she possibly play like this? He looked around the room and saw that everyone else was just as shocked as he was. But they were also completely absorbed in the music. No one was thinking about Maria's job or her clothes anymore. They were only thinking about the incredible sounds coming from the piano. The music built to a powerful climax. Maria's hands moved with impossible speed and accuracy. The piano seemed to be singing and shouting at the same time. The melody soared so high that it felt like it might lift everyone in the room right up to the ceiling. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the music became quiet again. Maria played the final section with such tenderness that it felt like a lullaby. Each note was placed with perfect care, like she was arranging flowers in a garden. As the piece neared its end, Maria's face was peaceful and calm. She looked like she was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The tired cleaning lady was gone, and in her place was a master musician. The final notes were barely above a whisper. They floated through the hall like butterflies, beautiful and delicate. Maria's hands moved slower now, savoring each sound, making every note count. And then, with one last gentle touch, she played the final chord. The silence that followed was complete. No one moved. No one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe. Maria sat at the piano bench with her hands resting on her lap. She looked down at the keys for a moment, then slowly lifted her head to look at the audience. The spell was broken. People began to stir, to remember where they were and what had just happened. But they were still too shocked to speak. Richard Blackstone was staring at Maria like he was seeing a ghost. His face was pale and his hands were shaking. The confident, arrogant man who had challenged Maria to play one note was gone. In his place was someone who looked confused and frightened. Dr. Crawford was the first person to move. She walked slowly toward the stage, her eyes never leaving Maria's face. "Maria," she said softly, "where did you learn to play like that?" Before Maria could answer, the silence was broken by the sound of one person clapping. Then another person joined in. Then another. Within seconds, the entire concert hall erupted in applause. People were standing up, clapping and cheering. Some were still crying. Others were shouting bravo, like they were at the opera. The applause went on and on. It was the kind of applause that usually only happened after the greatest performances by the most famous musicians in the world. Maria sat at the piano, looking surprised by the reaction. She had been so focused on the music that she had almost forgotten there were other people in the room. Richard Blackstone was not clapping. He was standing in the middle of the crowd, looking like someone had just told him that everything he believed about the world was wrong. Because in a way, that was exactly what had happened. The cleaning lady he had tried to humiliate had just given one of the most beautiful piano performances anyone in that room had ever heard, and he had no idea how to explain it. As the applause finally began to die down, Dr. Crawford reached the stage. She climbed the steps and walked over to Maria. "That was Chopin's Fantaisie Impromptu," she said quietly. "One of the most difficult pieces in the classical repertoire." Maria nodded. "Yes, it is. Who are you?" Dr. Crawford asked. It was a simple question, but everyone in the room wanted to hear the answer. Because the person who had just played that music was clearly not just a janitor who cleaned floors at night. Maria stood up from the piano bench. She looked out at all the faces staring at her. Some looked amazed, some looked confused, and one, Richard Blackstone, looked like his whole world had just fallen apart. "My name is Maria Santos," she said simply, "and I think it's time I told you the truth." Dr. Crawford looked at Maria with new eyes. "Please," she said gently, "tell us who you really are." Maria took a deep breath. She looked out at all the faces staring at her. The concert hall was completely quiet except for the sound of people breathing and waiting. 15 years ago, Maria began. "I was not a janitor. I was a concert pianist," gasps echoed through the hall. People leaned forward in their seats, hanging on every word. "I studied at the Moscow Conservatory in Russia," Maria continued. "It is one of the most famous music schools in the world. I was there for 6 years learning from the best teachers, practicing 8 hours every day." Richard Blackstone felt sick to his stomach. The Moscow Conservatory was legendary. Only the most talented musicians in the world studied there. "After I graduated," Maria said, "I performed in concert halls all over Europe. I played with orchestras in London, Paris, Vienna, and Rome. Music was my whole life. It was everything I dreamed about since I was a little girl." Professor Mitchell whispered to his wife, "That explains everything. No wonder she plays like that." Dr. Crawford climbed onto the stage and stood next to Maria. "What happened?" she asked softly. "Why did you stop performing?" Maria's eyes filled with tears, but she continued speaking. "I met my husband Carlos at a concert in New York. He was a music teacher from Mexico. We fell in love and got married. We were so happy." She paused for a moment, wiping her eyes. The audience waited patiently. "We moved to California and both got jobs teaching music. Carlos taught guitar and I taught piano. We had twin daughters, Emma and Sophia. Life was perfect." "But then what happened?" Dr. Crawford asked gently. "When the girls were 1 year old, Carlos got very sick. Cancer. We spent all our savings on doctors and treatments. I stopped performing to take care of him and the babies." The audience was completely silent. Even Richard had stopped fidgeting and was listening carefully. Carlos fought for 2 years, Maria continued, but the cancer was too strong. When he died, I had no money left. No savings, no job, just 2 little girls who needed their mother. Tears were rolling down Maria's cheeks now, but her voice stayed strong. I tried to go back to teaching music, but I was so sad that I could not play anymore. Every time I sat at a piano, I thought about Carlos and started crying. The music reminded me of everything I had lost. Dr. Crawford reached out and took Maria's hand. So you gave up music completely? I had to, Maria said. I needed to work to feed my daughters. Music jobs did not pay enough, and I could not perform anymore anyway. So I took cleaning jobs because they paid more and I could work at night while the girls slept. But you kept your skills, Professor Mitchell called out from the audience. Playing like that takes constant practice, Maria smiled sadly. Every night after I finished cleaning, I would sit at the piano for just a few minutes. Never long enough for anyone to hear. Just long enough to remember who I used to be. The crowd was amazed. For 3 years, Maria had been secretly practicing on the academy's piano late at night, keeping her skills sharp while working as a janitor to support her family. I told myself that someday, when the girls were older and did not need me as much, maybe I could try to play music again, Maria said. But I was afraid. Afraid that I had waited too long. Afraid that I was not good enough anymore. Richard Blackstone finally found his voice. But you are good enough, he said hoarsely. You're better than good enough. You're incredible, Maria looked at him. The man who had been so cruel to her earlier now looked small and ashamed. Why didn't you tell anyone? Dr. Crawford asked. Why didn't you tell me who you were when you applied for the cleaning job? Because I was ashamed, Maria admitted. I was a famous pianist who ended up cleaning floors. I thought people would feel sorry for me or think I was a failure. A failure? Professor Mitchell stood up from his seat. Maria, do you have any idea how talented you are? What you just played? I've heard that piece performed by some of the world's best pianists, and your performance was as good as any of them. Other music teachers in the audience nodded in agreement. They were all professionals who knew talent when they heard it. Dr. Crawford turned to face the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced, you have just witnessed something extraordinary. Maria Santos is not just a cleaning lady who happens to like music. She is a world-class pianist who has been working here for 3 years, taking care of our building while sacrificing her own musical career to raise her daughters. The information hit the crowd like a wave. People began talking excitedly to each other. This changes everything, someone said. We had a master musician cleaning our floors and we never knew, said another. Richard Blackstone felt worse with every word. He had humiliated someone who was far more talented than he would ever be. He had made fun of a woman who had given up her dreams to be a good mother. Maria, Dr. Crawford said. How old are your daughters now?
16, Maria answered.
They're both in their last year of high school. And do they know about your past? Do they know that their mother was a famous pianist? Maria shook her head. I never told them. I did not want them to feel bad that I gave up music for them. I wanted them to focus on their own dreams, not worry about mine. But they should know, Dr. Crawford said firmly. They should be proud of what their mother accomplished. And they should be proud of what she sacrificed for them. A woman in the audience stood up. Maria, my daughter is a student here. She's been taking piano lessons for 5 years. Would you consider teaching her? I would pay anything to have her learn from someone with your background. Before Maria could answer, other parents started standing up too. My son needs a piano teacher. Could you give lessons on weekends? We would be honored to have you teach our children. Maria looked overwhelmed. I don't know. I have not taught music in 15 years. But you could start again, Dr. Crawford said excitedly. Maria, we could offer you a position here at the academy. A real position, teaching piano to our students. You could earn much more money than cleaning, and you could be doing what you love again. The crowd erupted in applause at this suggestion. Everyone thought it was a wonderful idea. Everyone except Richard Blackstone. He was standing in the middle of the celebration feeling like the worst person in the world. He had called Maria a janitor like it was something to be ashamed of. He had made fun of her for thinking she could understand music. He had tried to humiliate her in front of all these people, and now he discovered that she was exactly the kind of person he claimed to respect. A highly educated, incredibly talented artist who had performed on some of the world's most famous stages. But more than that, She was someone who had made enormous sacrifices for her family, someone who had given up fame and success to take care of the people she loved, someone who had worked 2 jobs for years without complaining, just to make sure her daughters had what they needed. Richard realized that Maria was everything he pretended to be. Successful, talented and classy, but she was also something he was not. She was truly good. The crowd was still cheering and making plans for Maria's new career. When Richard quietly reached into his jacket and pulled out his checkbook, he had promised to give $10,000 to the academy if Maria could play one note properly. She had done much more than that. She had played one of the most beautiful pieces of music anyone had ever heard. But $10,000 suddenly seemed like a very small amount compared to what Maria deserved. Richard began writing, and the number he wrote was much larger than anyone expected. Richard Blackstone stood frozen in the middle of the celebrating crowd. His face had turned pale and his hands were shaking as he held his checkbook. Around him, people were still talking excitedly about Maria's incredible performance and her amazing story. But Richard was not celebrating. He was remembering every cruel word he had said to Maria, every mocking laugh, every time he had talked down to her like she was less than human. The worst part was realizing that even if Maria had just been a regular cleaning lady with no musical background, his behavior would still have been wrong. No one deserved to be treated the way he had treated her. Dr. Crawford was still on the stage with Maria, discussing the possibility of her becoming a piano teacher at the academy. Parents in the audience were calling out offers for private lessons. Everyone was excited about discovering this hidden treasure in their midst. "Maria," Dr. Crawford said, "I want to offer you a full-time position as our artist in residence. You would teach our most advanced students and give occasional performances for the academy. The salary would be much more than what you make from both your current jobs combined." Maria's eyes filled with tears again. I don't know what to say. "This is like a dream. Say yes," someone shouted from the audience. "Please say yes," called another voice. Maria looked out at all the encouraging faces. For the first time in 15 years, she felt hope about her future. Maybe she really could return to the world of music. Maybe it was not too late. "I would love to accept your offer," she said finally, "but I need to think about my daughters. They are my first priority." "Of course they are," Dr. Crawford said, "and we want to help with that too. The academy has a scholarship program. If your daughters are interested in music, we would be honored to provide them with free lessons and training. And if they're not interested in music," Professor Mitchell added, "we also have academic scholarships for college preparation. We take care of our family here." Richard watched all of this happening and felt sick with guilt. These people were trying to help Maria because they recognized her talent and her worth as a person. He had tried to hurt her because, why? Because she was working a job he thought was beneath him? Because he enjoyed making other people feel small? He looked down at the check he was writing. He had started with $10,000 as promised. But then he crossed it out and wrote a much larger number. Then he crossed that out too and wrote an even larger number. Finally, he tore up the check and started over. This time he wrote down a number that shocked even him, but it still did not feel like enough to make up for what he had done. A woman next to him noticed what he was writing. "Oh my goodness," she whispered to her husband. "Look at what Richard is donating." Word spread quickly through the crowd. People began looking over at Richard and the check in his hands. But instead of looking impressed, many of them looked uncomfortable. "Money does not fix everything," one man said quietly. "No amount of money makes up for treating someone like that," agreed a woman nearby. Richard heard their whispers and knew they were right. What he had done to Maria was not the kind of mistake that could be fixed with money. He had tried to humiliate her in front of all these people. He had treated her like she was worthless because of her job. The crowd was starting to quiet down as people noticed the tension around Richard. Maria and Dr. Crawford stopped their conversation and looked over to see what was happening. "Mr. Blackstone," Dr. Crawford called out. "Did you want to say something?" Richard stood there holding his check, feeling like every eye in the room was judging him, which they probably were, and they had every right to. He started, then stopped. His usual confident voice was gone. He sounded like a scared child. "You what?" Maria asked gently. Even after everything he had done to her, her voice was kind. Richard walked slowly toward the stage. Each step felt like it took forever. When he reached the steps, he climbed up and stood in front of Maria. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. The biggest apology I have ever given anyone in my life. The crowd was completely silent now. Everyone was watching this powerful, arrogant man try to find words for his shame. What I did to you tonight was inexcusable, Richard continued. I tried to humiliate you because I thought it would be funny, because I thought I was better than you. He looked down at his expensive shoes. I was wrong about everything. You are not just a better musician than I could ever be. You are a better person than I could ever be. Maria listened without saying anything. Her face showed no anger, just sadness for how much pain people could cause each other. You gave up a brilliant career to take care of your family, Richard went on. You worked 2 jobs to give your daughters a good life. You never complained or felt sorry for yourself. And I made fun of you for it. Tears were starting to form in Richard's eyes. I called you the help, like that was something to be ashamed of. But the truth is, you help people every day. You take care of this beautiful building so students can learn music. You sacrifice your own dreams so your daughters can chase theirs. You make the world a better place. He held out the check to Maria. I promised you $10,000 if you could play 1 note properly. You played thousands of notes, all of them perfect. This check is for much more than $10,000, but it is still not enough to make up for how I treated you. Maria looked at the check. The amount written on it made her gasp. It was enough money to pay for both her daughters' college educations and still have plenty left over. Mr. Blackstone, she said softly, I appreciate your apology, and I appreciate this generous donation to the Academy, but you do not owe me anything. Yes, I do, Richard insisted. I owe you my respect, which I should have given you from the beginning. I owe you an explanation for why I acted so badly. He turned to face the crowd. I want everyone here to know something about me, something I have never admitted before. The audience leaned forward, curious about what Richard was going to say. I grew up poor, Richard said simply. My family had no money. My father worked in a factory and my mother cleaned houses for rich people. I was ashamed of them. I was ashamed of myself. This was not what people had expected to hear. Richard Blackstone was known for his wealth and success, not for a humble background. When I got rich, I promised myself I would never be looked down on again, Richard continued. But instead of just lifting myself up, I started pushing other people down. I started treating working people the way rich people had once treated my family. He looked back at Maria. When I saw you tonight, working hard and taking pride in your job, you reminded me of my mother. And instead of respecting that, I tried to make you feel as small as I used to feel. The crowd was completely quiet. Some people were crying. Others looked angry. Everyone was thinking about times when they had been treated badly by people who thought they were better. Maria, Richard said, you are everything I should have become when I got successful. You are strong and kind and dignified no matter what job you do. You make me want to be a better person. Maria stepped forward and did something that shocked everyone. She reached out and gently took Richard's hand. We all make mistakes, she said quietly. What matters is what we do after we realize we were wrong. Richard squeezed her hand gratefully. What can I do to make this right? Maria smiled. You can help other people the way these kind folks are helping me. You can remember that everyone deserves respect no matter what job they do. And you can teach your children to be better than we were. The crowd began to applaud again, but this time they were not just clapping for Maria's music. They were clapping for her kindness, her forgiveness, and her wisdom. Richard wiped his eyes and nodded. I promise I will. And for the first time in years, Richard Blackstone made a promise that he actually intended to keep. 6 months later, Maria Santos stood in the wings of Carnegie Hall in New York City. She was wearing a beautiful black evening gown that sparkled under the stage lights. Her hair was styled elegantly, and she looked like the professional concert pianist she had once been. But she was nervous. It had been 15 years since she performed on a stage this famous. Carnegie Hall was where the world's greatest musicians played. Tonight, she would be performing her comeback concert for an audience of over 2,000 people. Mom, you look beautiful, said a voice behind her. Maria turned to see her daughters, Emma and Sophia, walking toward her. They were both wearing pretty dresses and big smiles. In the past 6 months, their lives had changed completely. When Maria had come home that night after the incident at the academy, she had sat her daughters down and told them the whole truth about her past. She had shown them old photographs of her performing in famous concert halls. She had played recordings of her concerts from years ago. The girls had been amazed. They had always known their mother was special, but they had no idea she had been famous. They were proud of her for giving up her career to take care of them, but they were also excited that she was getting a chance to return to music. "Are you ready for this?" Sophia asked. "I think so," Maria said. "It feels strange to be back on a stage like this." "You're going to be amazing," Emma said confidently. "We heard you practicing. You sound even better than those old recordings." Maria had accepted Dr. Crawford's offer to become artist-in-residence at the Harmony Music Academy. The job paid well and allowed her to teach music to talented students. But the best part was that she could play piano again every day. Word of her story had spread quickly through the music world. A video of her performance that night had been recorded by someone in the audience and posted online. Within days, millions of people had watched it. Music lovers around the world were amazed by her talent and moved by her story. Concert promoters began calling, offering her opportunities to perform. At first, Maria was hesitant. She had been away from the concert stage for so long, but Dr. Crawford and her new colleagues at the academy encouraged her to try. "You have a gift," Dr. Crawford had told her, "and gifts are meant to be shared with the world." Tonight's concert at Carnegie Hall was the result of months of preparation. Maria had been practicing 4 hours every day, getting her technique back to its peak level. She had worked with coaches to help her overcome her stage anxiety. She had chosen a program of music that told the story of her journey, from loss and struggle to hope and renewal. "5 minutes, Miss Santos," called the stage manager. Maria took a deep breath. Through the curtain, she could hear the audience talking and settling into their seats. She knew that many people had come not just to hear her play, but to witness the return of a musician who had disappeared from the concert world 15 years ago. In the front row sat Dr. Crawford and several faculty members from the academy. Her piano students had also come to support her. They were all excited to see their teacher perform on one of the world's most famous stages. But the person Maria was most happy to see in the audience was Richard Blackstone. True to his word, Richard had changed his life completely after that night at the academy. He had donated a large amount of money to create scholarship funds for students whose families could not afford music lessons. He had also started a foundation that helped working parents pursue their dreams. More importantly, he had changed how he treated people. He was still wealthy and successful, but he was no longer arrogant or cruel. He treated everyone with respect, regardless of their job or background. Richard had personally funded tonight's concert, not because he wanted recognition, but because he wanted to help Maria share her gift with the world. He had also made sure that tickets were available for free to music students and working families who could not afford the regular prices. 2 minutes, Miss Santos. Maria hugged her daughters one more time. "Thank you for supporting me," she said. "Thank you for showing us that it's never too late to chase your dreams," Emma replied. Maria walked to the edge of the stage. The piano was waiting for her. A beautiful Steinway grand, just like the one at the academy where everything had changed 6 months ago. She thought about that night and how terrified she had been. She had been so afraid of being humiliated, so sure that she would fail, but instead she had found the courage to be herself again. The curtain rose and Maria walked onto the stage. The audience erupted in applause before she had even played a note. People stood up and cheered, welcoming her back to the world of professional music. Maria sat at the piano bench and adjusted it slightly, just as she had done that night at the academy. She placed her hands on the keys and looked out at the audience. In the front row, she could see Richard Blackstone clapping enthusiastically. Next to him sat Dr. Crawford, beaming with pride. And in the special section reserved for family, Emma and Sophia were cheering louder than anyone else. Maria began to play. The first piece was the same Chopin Fantaisie Impromptu that had revealed her secret that night. But this time she was not playing it to prove anything to anyone. She was playing it as a celebration of music, of second chances, and of the power of believing in yourself. The music filled Carnegie Hall with its beauty. Every note was perfect, every phrase was filled with emotion. The audience was completely captivated from the first moment to the last. When the piece ended, the applause was thunderous. But Maria was just getting started. For the next 2 hours, she performed a program that showcased not only her incredible technical skills, but also her deep understanding of music as a language of the heart. She played pieces that spoke of sadness and loss, remembering the difficult years after her husband's death. She played pieces that spoke of hope and determination, reflecting her years of working hard to support her daughters. And she ended with pieces that spoke of joy and triumph, celebrating this moment of return to the life she loved. When the concert ended, the entire audience stood up and gave her a standing ovation that lasted for 10 minutes. People were crying, cheering, and calling for more music. Maria stood at the piano and looked out at all the faces celebrating with her. She thought about the long journey that had brought her to this moment. The sacrifices, the struggles, the years of dreaming about a day like this. But most of all, she thought about how grateful she was for all of it. The difficult times had made her stronger. Working as a janitor had taught her that every job has dignity. Raising her daughters had shown her what really mattered in life. And that night at the academy, when Richard Blackstone had tried to humiliate her, had actually set her free. It had given her the courage to stop hiding who she really was. After the concert, there was a reception where Maria met with audience members, fellow musicians, and music critics. Everyone wanted to talk to her about her performance and her story. "What's next for you?" asked a reporter from a major music magazine. Maria smiled. "I have been offered concerts all over the world," she said. "But I also want to keep teaching at the academy. I want to help young musicians find their own voices. And I want to help working parents who have dreams they've put aside," she added. "Just because life gets difficult doesn't mean we have to give up on what makes us happy." Later that evening, as the reception was ending, Richard Blackstone approached Maria. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" Maria asked. "For showing me who I could be," Richard replied. "For teaching me that how we treat people says everything about who we are." "You learned that yourself," Maria said. "I just reminded you of something you already knew." Richard smiled. "My mother would have loved you," he said. "She cleaned houses her whole life, and she was the strongest, kindest person I ever knew. I forgot that for a while, but you helped me remember." As Maria rode home with her daughters that night, she felt more content than she had in years. She was returning to the career she loved. But she was also keeping the life she had built. Her daughters were proud of her, and she was proud of the women they were becoming. "Mom," Sophia said as they pulled into their driveway, "we've been thinking." "About what?" Maria asked. "We want to learn piano," Emma said. "We want you to teach us." Maria's eyes filled with happy tears. "Are you sure?" "It's a lot of work." "We're sure," Sophia said. "We want to understand the music that makes you so happy." As they walked into their house together, Maria realized that this was the best part of her comeback. Not the applause or the reviews or the job offers. The best part was sharing her love of music with the people she loved most. 6 months ago, she had been afraid to let anyone know who she really was. Tonight, she had performed for the world as Maria Santos, mother, teacher, musician, and survivor, and she had never felt more like herself. The next morning, Maria woke up early and made breakfast for her daughters, just like she had done every day for 15 years. But now, instead of rushing off to cleaning jobs, she was preparing to teach piano lessons to students who were excited to learn from a master. Before leaving for the academy, she sat down at the small piano in their living room, a gift from Richard Blackstone, and played a few gentle notes. Just like she had done on that fateful night, she was playing for the pure joy of making music.